What it is, y'all? It's Monty Mentality. We back again, number 8, solo dolo this time. As you know, do the usual: like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you know when these are dropping. If life goes as planned in the early 2025, we will be cranking out more of these in 2025. I want to get on probably a bi-weekly cadence at least. So, like I said, if things go as planned, with what I'm working on outside of here, then that will be the case. I have been procrastinating on this episode a bit uh, due to just a lot of brain fog, and there's so much I want to talk about, but you can't talk about everything in one swoop. But sometimes you just gotta jot some stuff down and then get the ball rolling, and that's how you start getting stuff done. Sometimes you just get started. That's your first Montyism of the day. Yeah. And also, I got double vaccinated yesterday because I was a responsible adult and actually went to the doctor, got physical and all that, and they gave me 2 shots. So I'm not all the way there right now, still kind of recovering from those. But, we step up to the challenge. We don't run from challenges over here. So, yes, I'm not all the way there, but we still going to get this done. So let's get started with the show, which, first off, of course, this is a special Christmas edition of Monty Mentality. And one thing that we were talking about with my family, my cousins one day, is how Christmas is so, like, how is Christmas enjoyable, when you're single and childless, like you ain't really got nothing to look forward to, am I lonely because I'm single and childless out here? Well, first of all, I'm a man, so fuck out of here. That's number one. As a man, why are you sad on Christmas because you ain't got your own family? Like, come on, you gotta be better than that. Like, dog, like be serious for once. What I look like. But also, secondly, yeah, I do got kids. All right, I got hella kids. Let's be like, sure, they don't live with me. They not on my birth certificate, or I should say, I'm not on their birth certificates. But I got them. I got a lot. Okay. The names are London, Bailey, Tate, Zaya, Brody, and Brave. Also, I got some bonus ones like Paisley and Diesel and Zen, and an extra bonus with Drew. So yeah, I got hella kids out here. Santa Monty is getting down to business this year. So yeah, I do got something to look forward to besides just, being by myself. Yeah, we've spent joy. I'm probably doing more for Christmas, to be honest, than a lot of dads are, if I'm being real with you. But, you know, that's Uncle Brandon for you. But yeah, so now we get into the meat of our first real topic of the day, which is marriage and why we should emphasize it as a black community. Yeah, something that we don't really do and haven't been doing for a long time. So now the thing about America in particular, and the West, and any like, free society is that marriage rates are in big decline from where they were, decades and decades ago. Just to give you some hard numbers from, well, first this number right here. So, black women are almost 5 times as likely than white women to not have ever been married by the time they hit their early 40s. 34% of black women compared to 7% of white women. Yeah, that's quite the gap, isn't it? And if you look at the 2021 census, 34.4% of black men and 28.6% of black women were married at that time. I believe that might have been 18 to 55 age, or all of them, I'm not sure. But either way, those numbers are obviously not the highest, particularly when you compare them to 1950. 1950, those same numbers, 34.4% for black men in 21, 64% in 1950. Black women, an even bigger gap, 28.6% in 21, 62% in 1950. So clearly, there's been a major shift here. So what gives? Why is it that the marriage rate is so low? So before we get to why you should give a shit, let's first go over some theories as to why this may be. So, number one, and what a lot of people online or whatever might try to say, or even guys at your barbershop, etc., is it feminism and women deciding that marriage and kids as well, we'll get to that, is a terrible deal? Well, my personal answer to that, because this is my podcast, my opinion, yes and no. So, I would say yes in the sense of because women have more of their own money and also just their general attitudes on being dependent on men has changed. They're not as desperate to get married as they once were, perhaps. That's probably a big part of it. And like I said, being able to support themselves more and just, again, the general attitude of being dependent on men and believing that they can handle it on their own. That is a big part of this. However, I am not sold that this is the primary driving force, and I'll explain. So, first off, anecdotally, what I would say is that for the most part, as far as I know, pretty much every, if not every woman, almost every black woman I know that's not openly gay see themselves being married at some point in their life, and they see themselves being married to a man at that. So I don't think necessarily that they're like deliberately choosing not to be married. At least choosing is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. So, like, yes, they might be choosing in the sense of they won't just date or be with anyone out of desperation, but if they had someone that they would consider a quality option that was willing to go there with them, my thought is they most of, if not all of them, would. So, however, it probably is at least somewhat aided, in my opinion, by social media. As someone who's been heavy on social media for the basically since it's really jumped off, but really, especially, there's been a shift in the last 12 to 15 years with Twitter and Instagram in particular. Facebook, not quite as much. Facebook is more, that's your own little bubble for the most part, but Twitter and Instagram is when you really start branching out. And especially liberal feminists on Twitter, I see, because I followed a good chunk and I see a lot of it. They're basically saying, all men are trash. And mind you, the funny part is a lot of them is all men are trash but mine, basically, because a lot of these women are partnered up themselves. They're married themselves, but telling all the other single women, like, all these men suck. I mean, not mine, though. Mine don't suck. But, I mean, the rest of them, yeah, they all suck. And then, you're surprised that women are not as eager to get into long-term partnerships as they may have been before. Yeah, that's a shocking development, and also a shocking development that men coming up that have seen that, especially those coming of age, like, I think that this is particularly affecting those that were probably born that late millennial to early Gen Z range. So we're talking like 93 to about maybe the early 2000s. So like 2001, 2, basically your formative years were like, you know, that early 2010s to right before COVID. If your formative years were during this time, then I think that you were largely affected by a lot of this, because that's definitely the generation where social media was a much bigger deal. I'm just old enough to have missed that. At least, social media didn't really pop for me until I was an adult. So, but for those that are, like I said, in that younger range, you probably were on social media by what, middle school, and definitely by high school, all throughout high school. So that probably had an effect. But yeah, so now I'm gonna go to what I actually think is the issue, though, if you even see it as an issue, because you might not. But what I think is really happening here, the number one culprit is a shortage of black men. So easy hard number here. For every 100 black women, there are 79 black men. So that means if I filled up the room right now with 5 black women, that means that I barely don't even have 4 black men to counteract with. So that's kind of an issue, right? Like, just a black man shortage is definitely a real thing. That's not just a myth. That is an actual real thing that, black women vastly outnumber black men. 5 to 4, basically, and technically a little less, even a little worse than that, but basically 5 to 4, right? Also, especially high quality black men in particular. So now, for the sake of argument, let's define high quality as, just to make it simple, let's say educated, so like they have some sort of education beyond high school. It doesn't have to be a degree, but obviously that's the most straightforward. But also like maybe trade school or something that would set them up to have either some sort of a career or resilience, or to be able to maybe even get into entrepreneurship more effectively, etc. Like let's assume that they are also gainfully employed, or again entrepreneur that actually makes real money, and they're self-sufficient, meaning, let's just say basics. They got their own car, they got a house, or at least a place that they can rent, etc. Just make it very simple. That is our basic marks for a quality black man. There's a shortage of those even more, if we're being honest. So, like I said, that outnumbering that black women have of black men, along with the gaps in education, likelihood to be incarcerated, early violent deaths. We know black men are the most likely to die early deaths from violence. Like, when you throw, and there's probably other stuff that I can't even cover here, but when you throw all that in, it's pretty obvious that just from a numbers game, this becomes quite difficult to pair black men and women off. Uh, Now, I think another thing that even goes beyond that, that exacerbates the issue as well, is that the black men who are eligible, who could theoretically get married, are less likely compared to other races to prioritize marriage. Now, and there's research on this, this is even adjusting for social economics and education and all that good stuff, right? Now, I will say that black men who are more educated and more gainfully employed, more career driven, more ambitious, all of that, they are more likely to want to get married than, their less, let's say, well off counterparts. But even still, they still could be a little more aggressive with it, right? And then, of course, like I said, when you throw in the rest of that pool that's not as well off, well, I mean, yeah, you get that. Like, basically, what research clearly shows is that people who are more educated and more well off financially tend to be more likely to get married and more likely to stay married. Just to put it into perspective, when people who have at least a high school or let me say a high school education or less, the divorce rate is far, far higher compared to college educated people. Not only are they less likely to be married at all, they're less likely to stay married even if they manage to do it. So clearly this is, there's some meat on the bone there that we can address. But now let's get to why should we care? Why does this matter? Like, being single isn't bad, and you're right, it's not bad. Like, especially like, there's many paths to greatness, many paths to a great quality life. This is more talking about generalities. Like, if you're talking about the collective, what's good for each specific individual may differ, but we can see trends in terms of like what's best overall, you know. So, and that's what we're focused on here. Not necessarily individuals. You might not ever get married and your life may still be fantastic. But in terms of overall, if we're trying to do what's best for the overall community, then yeah, it would be better if more people got married, more people of those people, particularly quality people, which, that could be problematic to put it that way. But if more of them reproduce, then, there are benefits to that for the community at large. So, but let's get to the individual differences, or at least the individual benefits, which by proxy would help the community as a whole. So number one, I'm not gonna say this is the number one benefit. I actually will state that after this one. It's household income. So obviously, two incomes are better than one. Duh. I think I saw a stat on Twitter that basically women's household income almost triples when they're married versus single, which makes sense because generally, even still today, men are the breadwinners. Now, of course, with blacks, this is less pronounced. Black men do make slightly more than black women, but it is a smaller gap compared to other races, especially once you get to the educated brackets. But still, clearly there's a benefit to having two incomes coming in instead of one. And I would also say that part of the delay for adulthood for us, because I think that our generation and definitely Gen Z, So Gen Z, for those of you who aren't tracking, are those born from 97 to 2012. So a lot of them aren't even adults yet. But the oldest of Gen Z just turned 27 this year. They'll be 28 in 2025. So they're full. There's some full-fledged adults in there, but they're not adulting at the same rate as previous generations. The markers of like established career, having their own homes, even having kids, etc. As a collective, they are not on the same track as previous generations, and a large part of that is because we're getting married later and later. The average marriage age, I didn't jot this down before the podcast, but I just know it's much higher than it was before, and so that's a large part of why I think, like I said, adulting, like becoming full adults, is slower for our generation and the generation right behind us than previously. Again, I'm a full millennial, like I'm squarely in the middle of it. But also, uh, the economy as it is built for two incomes, because as women have gotten their own money, they have, elevated in terms of their ability to progress professionally. Education, which education is the number one way to traverse social classes. If you want to go move up a social class, a social economic class, that is, education is your best bet. This is pretty much not debatable, at least again on a grand scale. Of course, there are other ways, but generally, if you're a regular schmo, that's the best way for you to do it. And so, as women have been able to do that, especially black women, guess what happens? The demand for goods goes up because now you are putting in more people in the pool that can spend their own money, that can spend more money. And this even includes just, regular necessities like housing, transportation, so like cars and all of that. The price of everything goes up because the demand is higher, which means this economy that we're in now is much more built for two incomes than the one our grandparents and great grandparents came up in. So it is much less feasible for one income to handle, and especially as what we consider a quality life, the standard for that to go up, it is just not reasonable to expect one man or woman, for that matter, to live that out to their best on their own, unless they're like making real bank. Like there's a clear ceiling when you have one income coming in versus two, and especially if they're on similar levels. So there's that, and then what I think is the most important reason for marriage being emphasized, kids. So children. For those coming up, I actually saw this on Twitter today from Rob Henderson, where he stated the biggest predictor of bad life outcomes, or at least let's say undesirable life outcomes for kids coming up, surprisingly, it's not poverty. Actually, they said the link between poverty and the undesirable life outcomes is actually not that strong, if there is a link at all. What is a big link is instability. So instability is the big weak link in terms of like what will create less than desirable outcomes for kids. And a strong, stable environment is probably your best bet to raise kids in. And marriage helps provide that. Now, of course, an unhappy marriage mitigates some of this, duh. But we're assuming that you're actually going to do your best to make your marriage a happy, good one, right? But yeah, and let's keep in mind, when we say instability, we're talking about things like how often you move, how many caretakers you've had, are your parents married or divorced? Are you in a single parent house? And if you're in a single parent house, how many romantic partners did they have? Like, all of these are things that can help predict things like substance abuse, incarceration, violence, etc. These are all things that, real early pregnancies, unplanned pregnancies, like just stuff like that is more predictable in people who grew up in less stable situations. It's not even just really even poverty. It's just unstable. Like, even if you grow up in a, well off financial situation, if you're constantly moving from place to place, or Yeah, sure, your mom is making good bank, but she also has like five boyfriends by the time you got out of high school. Yeah, that could be less than ideal, but you gotta get it how you live, right? Um, Also, happiness. Happiness is another one. So, contrary to some narratives, both men and women on average are happier married than single, particularly as we age. Per the General Social Survey in 2022, married women with kids were the happiest, then married without kids, then single with kids, and single without kids. Now, a note here, single without kids was, while they were the least happy, it was still only 24.6%. So, you know, most people actually report being happy, so that's good, number one. But also, single without kids were more likely to be very happy than single with. So it seems to be, lower floor, higher ceiling in that case, let's call it. But yeah, generally, men and women, per the same survey, were overwhelmingly happy with their marriages. Our generation is generally better at marriage. I think in large part there's a selection bias there because we're also more intentional about marriage than our fathers and grandfathers and mothers and grandmothers. We want to be married more so than they do if we do. So obviously, that helps in terms of us being better at it. Uh, and then another big one, actually, this is the last big one, is longevity. So both married men and women tend to live longer on average than singles. Now, I do think there is, and the effect is stronger in men, but not a lot, not by a lot actually. Again, contrary to narratives that only men benefit from marriage, this is not true. Women also generally tend to benefit, especially if they choose someone halfway decent. Now, here's the thing. Again, I do think there's some selection bias here because generally, especially men, the ones who tend to get married and stay married also have certain qualities about them. They're probably more reliable, they're probably more driven, they probably are more likely to take care of themselves, have high self esteem. These are all things that generally tend to help you in creating and maintaining long term relationships. But nonetheless, we see that a trend that, again, married people tend to live a bit longer than their single counterparts. So that's another thing. So, how do we promote marriage within the black community? How do we make it more viable? Well, my number one answer is create more quality black men in the dating pool. So, obviously, this would be an emphasis on higher education, and that doesn't, obviously, college is the main one, but also trade, whatever secondary education can help you carve out a career, maybe even become a great entrepreneur, whatever it is, but give them that route that will make them a viable candidate out here for black women to want. And it has to start with the black boys coming up. So the ones that are in high school, middle school, even elementary right now, we really need to invest in those boys and make sure like that, hey, like they have their own issues that need to be attended to, and we need to take them seriously, and we need to invest and care for them and let them know that like, hey, you can be this, you can be that, and push them towards those more positive outcomes. Another thing is espouse the benefits of marriage for both sexes. Again, don't listen to those on social media that tell you women have no reason to get married. I mean, not saying everyone should get married. I don't believe that either. I believe you should have the right to get married, or not get married. You choose the path that's best for you. But in general, I think that we should not make marriage seem like it's such a downer. That would help a lot for men and women. Because also there's a lot of men that'll tell you that, oh, marriage is, don't ever do that. Like, just go out here, have fun, do this, and that. It's like having fun and being married don't have to be mutually exclusive. Yes, you have to make sacrifices, but the point of the sacrifices is that it should be worth it, right? So yeah. So in summary, even though I'm saying all this, and I myself am unlikely to get married, not because I wouldn't want to, but just because I don't have any viable candidates right now, or at least none that are currently available. So, you know, but I would if you put one in front of me. But hey, it is what it is, right? But I can acknowledge that as a whole, marriage is still very beneficial for people, and it's something that you should heavily consider, that we should heavily emphasize as a community. And with that, we can now transition into the sports section of the podcast. And the big one today is the NBA ratings and the state of the league and the game itself. So, big story in the NBA right now is how the ratings are suffering. There's complaints about a lot of things. Perhaps the biggest one is there's too many threes. Everyone plays the same, et cetera, et cetera. But before we get into some of that, let me first address things that I'm going to try to be positive about. I'm going to start with positivity, then we'll get to the concerns. And the positivity here is three things that I like about the league as it is right now, and then we'll get into three things I don't like, and then some of the general concerns and issues. So, number one thing I like about the league right now, the NBA Cup, which just concluded with the Milwaukee Bucks defeating the Oklahoma City Thunder to take it this year. The Lakers did win last year, but now it's the Bucks this year. It does add spice to the regular season. I like the courts. I mean, not, some of them are ugly. The red ones are kind of tough to watch, but generally, I like just the concept of the courts, of making a special court to denote, like, hey, this game is different from your normal game. Also, players and coaches take it seriously. Like, they are playing, like, maybe not full-on playoff mode, but they're definitely doing things that you don't see in normal regular season games. Guys playing more minutes, more specific adjustments. It's nice to see also guys trying harder defense. Like, you saw Giannis out there in that OKC game defending like he was. Like, yeah, the guys are actually, like, taking it very seriously, and that makes it a lot of fun. Another thing I like about the league currently, and this is going to go against what a lot of you would say, style of play. I actually like the style of play. I know all the threes, blah, 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 and like I said, we will adjust that, or I should say we will address that in a little bit. But it might seem too three-point heavy, but here's what I would say to that. One, and we'll probably address this again later, basically, let's be real. Threes are more exciting than mid-rangers. Let's be honest. Like, when you played NBA Jam coming up, what did you like to do? You like to dunk and you like to shoot threes. You wasn't shooting a bunch of mid-range jumpers in comparison. It was dunks and threes, right? That's what we like. That's more exciting. And so it's not necessarily bad to have all these threes and when you're giving up mid-ranges. Now, you would say, oh, but Brandon, what about dunks and layups? Guys are passing up layups to shoot threes. You see that sometimes, but let's go with some hard facts here. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I did look this up. You can look this up on Basketball Reference for yourself. These stats are publicly available. We have shot data going back to 1996, 97, right? And not just every shot taken during those years. So going back to the 5th Michael Jordan championship season, we have every shot taken in every game, and like the distance of the shot, et cetera, and even broken down a lot of those shots by dunks and layups. So according to that data, there are actually more dunks and layups now than there has ever been in any other era, at least going back to 97. So the idea that, oh, well, there's no dunks and layups, there's no going to the basket, it's just threes. No. Mid-rangers, you would be correct. Going to the rim, you would be wrong. There are more rim attacks, which makes sense because as teams have to spread out and guard the three-point line, guess what that opens up? The lane. And keep in mind that the rim is still the most valuable commodity, and teams still want to go to the rim first and foremost. But, of course, the defense takes that away, and so what? They sprayed out the three, and if they can manage to close you down at three, then, okay, maybe you're forced into a mid-range at that point. But, like, the other thing is, like, teams want to win. But we'll get to that. Also, yes, teams play different. The Celtics emphasize ball movement and drive and kick. The Nuggets, play through Jokic. They play a lot of dribble handoffs and, obviously he's in the post. And he's, they're trying to get to the rim. They're primarily a team that gets to the rim. The last 2 years, they've been last in the league in three-point attempts, but they're usually number one or close in getting to the basket and trying to attempt shots at the rim. Jokic creates a lot of layups and dunks. That's one of the things why he's the best offensive player in the league by far. And we also have like the Mavericks and the Hawks. They play more through their superstar in a heliocentric way, where it's like, hey, Luka, just give you the ball, run your pick and roll, set up the pins, he knocks him down. Uh, like I said, same thing with Trey. The Lakers are more rim heavy than other teams, with LeBron and AD and those guys. So yeah, there are different. Even defensively, there's different styles. You have teams like Miami that might be more focused on switching because that's Bam's thing, or you might have like the Milwaukee Bucks. They are more conservative. They might, put more of an emphasis on protecting the basket with Lopez and Giannis. There are different styles. OKC, they're more trying to force turnovers. They're trying to fly all over the court because they have those kind of athletes. So there are diversity in styles. You just got to know what to look for. And the third thing that I like about the league, the depth of talent compared to the past. Now, there's debate about this. People will say that the league is as skilled as it's ever been, and I think that is true. However, people focus on the wrong things. So they think about, well, comparing like say Luka Doncic and Giannis and Jokic to like the days of Hakeem, MJ, Shaq, etc. Like comparing to those guys, and Penny Hardaway, etc. Like those. Well, really, I would say in terms of superstars, the talent is similar to other great times in the league, but where you really see the difference, in my opinion, in terms of skill level, is like the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth guys. Those are the guys where the barrier of entry has become higher. Like if you're a 3-and-D guy, okay, that's cool if you can shoot a three and defend your position. But also, you need to perhaps be able to defend other positions. If you're a three, you might have to defend fours and twos, maybe even ones. If you can shoot the three, that's cool, but you got to be able to attack a closeout and make a decision, or else that limits how much you can get on the court, especially against better teams. If you're a big man, that's a defensive big man that protects the rim and whatnot, that's cool, but like you also got to be able to catch and finish an alley-oop perhaps, or finish around the basket, or at least be able to stretch the floor if you're not going to get played off the floor in the playoffs from that standpoint. Like, so I think that in terms of role players, that's where you really see the gap in terms of how good you need to be able to hang and survive. So that's a big thing that I like as well. Also, if you're a scoring six man, like, if you can't defend, you might get played off the floor. So, those are some things that I like. Now, let's get to the three things I currently don't like. So, number one, and this one might come out of left field to you, but the uniforms. First of all, this is the most boomer basketball opinion I have that I'm going to tell you, and that is home teams should wear white uniforms. They should be wearing white or light colored uniforms at home. Enough of this black uniforms at home. Every time the Lakers wear purple uniforms at home, I want to throw up. Like, no, they either should be wearing gold or white. Enough of this BS, Nike. Yes, Nike, I know it's your fault. And related to that, there's too many damn uniforms. We got to come up with a new city edition every damn year. And yes, I know, they got to make money or whatever, but there's value in having a brand. There's value in having this uniform is associated with the Los Angeles Lakers, with the Boston Celtics, with the Miami Heat, the New York Knicks, the Denver Nuggets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's value to the brand and saying, hey, when I see this uniform or these colors, I know that's the Chicago Bulls. I know that's the Washington Wizards. I know this is that team, et cetera, versus, the Milwaukee Bucks wearing like blue or something. Like, what kind of shit is that? Like, enough of all the uniforms. There should be 4 uniforms that a team gets to wear each year. You get a home, you get it away, you get an alternate, and you get a throwback. One throwback. That's it. All right? Enough of all this other nonsense. All right. Another thing I don't like, load management, or rather, stars just don't play in enough games. Now, to me, this is the biggest reason for the rating suffering, but we'll come back to that. So I will table the load management and star playing discussion in a little bit. And actually, the long-term fix for it, like I said, I'm not sure How you fix it, fewer games, that's unrealistic because both players and owners do not want that because that means lower game checks and lower arena checks, etc. So that's not realistic. Less mileage from the lower level. So you have guys playing like 6 games in one day and like AAU and stuff like that. Like, and really, that's really what I think a lot of it is these guys have a lot of mileage on them when they get to the league. And so that doesn't help. But again, should we have less of that? I don't know if that's realistic because again, basketball at the lower levels is super competitive. So I don't know how you fix that either. And then the 65 game rule for postseason awards like MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, etc., All NBA. It helped last year. Guys were playing more, but in some cases it backfired. Like Tyrese Halliburton, like he basically should have been out for a while with his hamstring, but he kept playing because he needed to get All NBA to get a bigger annual salary for his new contract, and now he's probably still hasn't recovered from that. Now he looks like ass compared to last year, and I think that's part of why. So, and guys were missing more games towards the latter part of the season. So yeah, it wasn't all good that guys were playing more games back then. So yeah, but like I said, I don't know the long term fix on that. But the last thing that I don't like currently is the BS foul drawing and just there is an imbalance, especially in the regular season, between how offense and defense are officiated. So, one thing I really don't like is like how the offensive player can like use their forearm to create space, but don't you dare as a defender put your forearm on the offensive player unless you're in the post. In the post, they let you get away with a lot of physicality, actually, probably too much in that case, and that might be part of why the post game is less emphasized. Not just because guys can't post; they're not incentivized to post as much and learn it because, well, the level of physicality they allow now in the post is actually greater than what they used to. And so, but that does not apply to the perimeter, obviously. On the perimeter, guys can get away with a lot of stuff. And, you have guys like Jalen Brunson that do the little flailing shit or whatever. I hate that. The league has gotten better with cutting down on some of that, but they still have a ways to go on that, in my opinion. Also, so now let's address, well, what about all the threes, Brandon? It's just too many threes. Oh my God. And like I said earlier, basically, teams are trading threes for, or I should say, they are trading mid ranges for threes. And like I said, we are actually seeing more dunks and layups as a result of this. And the biggest thing that I have with this complaint is that, do you want teams to do what's best to win or no? Because at the end of the day, that's why they're doing this. They're shooting all these threes because they're trying to win. And three is greater than two. And if you look at the return on investment of your average three-pointer in the NBA across the league is about 36%. So keep in mind, for a mid-ranger to match that, you would have to shoot, I'm good at math, 54%. 54%. The highest percentage that DeMar DeRozan, who's a mid-range master, has done in terms of long twos for his career is 49.5%. So he's a ways off from his career best season from being able to match your average three-pointer. Even your worst three-point shooting team is close to that. The worst three-point shooting in the league, last time I checked, was the Orlando Magic, and they were like 31% So in their case, you're looking at, 46.5% for a mid-ranger. Again, even that's like maybe not absolute best in the league numbers for mid-range, but it's not far off. Like I said, now there's a caveat here though about the mid-range. The mid-range becomes quite useful, particularly in the half court and in the playoffs when you play against better defenses, because guess what better defenses do? They take away the shots you want to take. So you have to at least have that in your bag when they force you to go to that. And so obviously some of the best offenses are able to attack you at all three levels. But again, the rim and the three-point line are going to be more emphasized in the mid-range. But, people love their contested mid-rangers. They really do. But if teams are trying to win, you don't want a lot of those, even from the best guys. I mean, maybe the absolute best guys, but again, you still would rather get a shot at the rim or out to the 3-point line. And there's a ceiling to how good your offense can be when that's the bulk of it. So again, you want teams to win or no? That's my question to you. And the main issues for the ratings going down, in my opinion. So to me, the number one reason is a lack of star power. The three biggest stars in the league currently all have birthdays that are in the 80s. That being Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and LeBron James. They are all LeBron turns 40 in a week. Steph is going to be 37 in 3 months. KD just turned 36 at the end of September. So that's the number one thing. And the biggest stars of the guys who are not that old are all foreign. Jokic, Giannis, Luka, Wemby, all those guys are foreign. And let's just be honest, they don't connect as well within a primarily North American audience. So that's another big part of it. I mean, we'll see how big Wemby gets, but there's probably a ceiling on how big he can get, as a non-American guy. And then the American guys that were supposed to be great, like Zion was supposed to be the next really big star. We see what happened with that, right? Or saw what happened. English, Brandon, English. Ja with his off-court struggles. Ja's another guy that has that potential to be that massive star. But again, his off-court struggles, the fact that he can struggle to stay healthy at times. The Grizzlies have yet to make a deep playoff run. All those things are working against him. Ant-Man has probably the best chance of all these guys. However, I wonder if he has the true potential to get to that best in the league level to be able to reach that kind of status. We will see on him. I'm skeptical, but that would definitely help. And I think another one that's, underrated is probably streaming. I think because basketball is not as much of an event like football is. Football is an event every Sunday, or, everyone's sitting there watching the game, whereas basketball is not quite like that. So streaming might have a little bit to do with it. That's probably overplayed in my opinion, but it's at least something to consider. Also, the threes may be a problem in the sense that if people think there's too many threes, well, that alone is enough to say that it could be a problem. Even perception can be reality, or at least it might as well be reality. So if people think the threes are a problem, well then sure. And then I think this is a very big reason. This is the second biggest reason in my opinion next to the star power, which is the way the media talks about the game, including former players, inside the NBA being the biggest offenders of this, arguably, which is they just trash the game. They act like they hate basketball. They act like they hate the NBA. They hate the current stars. They hate the game as it is. And I don't think that helps. Watch a basketball pregame show and then watch a football pregame show, and you'll see a stark difference in just their enthusiasm for the game. Football guys are enthusiastic about the game. They're enthusiastic about talking about football, talking about the X's and O's, talking about all of that. Whereas in basketball, they want to talk about drama or just like, oh, all these guys are soft or this, and that. And if I'm a casual fan and I'm listening to this, I'm like, why would I watch an NBA game if I'm constantly being told how much it sucks by the people who are supposed to be the game's biggest ambassadors? That doesn't make any sense. So I think that is a big part of it. So again, how do you fix that? I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade, but hopefully there are better days ahead for the narrative around the NBA and NBA fandom. Now let's transition though to football for a quick second. I'm going to talk here about first the MVP. So Josh Allen will win MVP. I'm going to tell you right now, he's going to win the MVP. He has the record. He has a good enough performance. He has the signature wins with Kansas City and Detroit. However, I would choose Lamar Jackson because Lamar Jackson has had a ridiculous season. I mean, an absolute ridiculous season. It's crazy. 34 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. and he's number one in the league in both touchdown percentage and interception percentage. Now, for those of you who are not tracking, that's percentage of pass attempts that end in a touchdown or end in an interception. So for him to be best in the league in both of those at the same time is absolutely insane. And related to that, he's also number one in adjusted net yards per attempt, an advanced stat from Pro Football Reference, and he leads this by a wide margin, which factors in not just your yards per attempt, but also sacks, touchdowns, and interceptions as well. So, yeah, like for him to be put up these kind of numbers, the problem is the Ravens are, coming into today, they're just 9-5. And they might not even win their division, though they are up on Pittsburgh right now as I record this. But that is the issue, and that's not going to be compelling enough for the wins crowd, people who like wins with their quarterbacks. So, but I will say, Josh Allen is a worthy MVP. He's having an MVP caliber season, so it's not the biggest travesty of justice I would ever see. Also, Saquon Barkley, I'm sorry, I just can't give it to a running back. That's just me, though. I can't do it. Running backs can never be more valuable than the best quarterbacks. They just can't. But, yeah, for Offensive Rookie of the Year, of course, it's Jaden Daniels. Fuck wrong with you? Enough with this Bo Nix nonsense. Get him out of here. No, it's Jaden Daniels Award. That's the Commander's Award to have. The only other real contender should be Brock Bowers. Other than that, it's Jaden Daniels. Give it to him. Get out my face. And who will win the Super Bowl is wide open, in my opinion. KC, and to me, it's not as strong as they were the last couple years. Their defense, even though, their points per drive are not as strong. Obviously Mahomes is trying to carry that offense. You still scared of them because, like I said, they do have Mahomes. You have Andy Reid. You don't want to sleep, but they don't look as strong. Detroit is just hurt all over the place on defense. So that's going to hurt them. Buffalo, Baltimore, Pittsburgh all have their flaws. Philly is probably the NFC favorite, but, like I said, we'll see what happens with them as, they get into the playoffs. They do play my Commanders tomorrow. By the time that goes up, that game should already be final, so we'll see. But I think Philly's going to obviously win the East. They're going to be a top 2 seed, so given Detroit's injuries, you probably got to say Philly's the favorite, but I'm skeptical that they can get it all the way done. But we'll see on that. And the last major topic for today. It's a new year coming, which means, of course, for some of you, that means a new gym resolutions, rededicating yourselves to the gym again. And, hopefully this time you don't fail again. But why do people fail? Because that has been something that has fascinated me ever since I finally got myself together and transformed myself to where now I'm a regular gym bro. So, my hypothesis why most people fail, and ultimately it comes down to this. People fail to push themselves in the gym. Even people who regularly go to the gym struggle to push themselves. And by pushing yourself, what does that mean? Like, first of all, yes, there are some knowledge gaps that people have. That's why people hire personal trainers and coaches and stuff. But ultimately, this isn't the main thing, because for the most part, in terms of the basic stuff, people know what they need to do. They know that you need to actually show up to the gym. Crazy, I know. You have to show up to the gym to get something out of the gym. Wild. Also, emphasize more whole foods over hyper-processed foods. We know this. Whether or not you're into counting calories, protein, macros, blah, 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 this food group, that food group, woo, 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 you know that generally eating a banana is probably a better idea than eating Doritos. You are aware that eating lean chicken is better than eating chicken nuggets. Like, this is basic stuff. Like, we know that. We know that there are certain things to do there that we should be doing. Also, getting better at working out. We know this. Intuitively, we know that, hey, if you're in Planet Fitness right now, you're a lady, and you're squatting on the Smith machine with a big plate aside, you know that at some point, one day, you probably want to get to the point where you're doing 2 big plates per side. We know this. We know that if you can do 10 minutes on the Stairmaster, level 7, let's say, One day you want to be doing that for 20 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes. Like, we know this. But pushing yourself actually means challenging to do better than you did the last time you were in the gym. So, again, let's go back to our Smith machine squat example. Let's say you're doing 3 sets of 10 with the big plates on each side. You're able to do that in good, solid form. Next time you step into Planet Fitness, guess what you do? You add a 2.5 plate on each side of that. Maybe with the same form, you got to keep your form the same, of course, but once you got that part down, you say, okay, maybe you get 10, 9, and 8 on those same 3 sets. So now you try to bring those other 2 sets up to where they're both 10s in the same form again, and then you add, go from adding a 2.5 on each side to a 5 once you do that, and repeat that process over and over and over and over. And that's also how you keep yourself honest, because if you're just, if you're going to the gym and lifting the same weights with the same form for 5 years, guess what happens? You look the same, you're the same person. That doesn't make you disciplined, okay? Discipline means actually bettering yourself. That's not bettering yourself, okay? Like, yes, it's nice that you go to the gym and you're active, but at least try to be better when you go. And I will say this from my experience and from what I've observed, I see plenty of people who are able to go to the gym consistently and like actually work out good, actually handle business in there, but they struggle with the eating part. I do see that. What I almost never see is someone who eats excellent but sucks at the gym, like sucks at going to the gym. Like I don't see too often. Usually, if they're undisciplined in the gym, they're probably undisciplined everywhere else, or at least in their diet, I should say. So generally, if you can become more disciplined in the gym, that probably will give you the mental fortitude and tools to be more disciplined with your diet. It definitely happened for me. So it might help if you slay one dragon at a time. That's your Montyism of the day. And in closing, let's say rest in peace to the legendary Ricky Henderson, one of the great base stealers of all time, primarily with the Oakland A's. So rest in peace to him. I think they just announced his death today. Shouts out to Greenhouse Studios and Aunt Mary and Aunt Lumpy. Aunt Mary complimented me greatly on this podcast not too long ago. So shouts to her especially. And like, subscribe, hit that bell button. And until next time.